Evelyn Rothstein and Andrew S. Rothstein once said in their book English Grammar Instruction That Works 2009. In 1066, William the Conqueror led the Norman invasion of England, marking the beginning of the Middle English period. This invasion brought a major influence to English from Latin and French. As is often the case with invasions, the conquerors dominated the major political and economical life in England. While this invasion had some influence on English grammar, the most powerful impact was on vocabulary. I'm Akbar Musyaid, and welcome to Middle English in Language. There are three main topics that will be discussed in this video. The first one is Norman Conquest, next is Middle English language, and the last one is transition to modern English. The first topic that we are going to discuss is Norman Conquest and what happened during Middle English. Norman Conquest is military conquest of England by William, Duke of Normandy, primarily affected by his decisive victory at the Battle of Hastings on October 14, 1066, and resulting ultimately in profound political, administrative, and social changes in the British Isles. The Conquest was the final act of a complicated drama that had begun years earlier, in the reign of Edward the Confessor, the last king of Anglo-Saxon royal line. Edward, who had almost certainly designated William as his successor in 1051, was involved in a childless marriage and used his lack of an heir as a diplomatic tool, promising the throne to different parties throughout his reign, including Harold Godwinson, later Harold II, the powerful Earl of Wessex at the time. Amid these wilder conflicting claims, Edward, from his deathbed, named Harold his successor on January 5, 1066, and Harold was crowned king the following day. Knowing this, William had secured support for his invasion from both the Norman aristocracy and the papacy. By August 1066, he had assembled a force of 4,000 to 7,000 knights and foot soldiers, but unfavorable winds detained his transport for 8 weeks. Finally, on September 27th, while Harold was occupied in the north by the landing of Vikings, the winds changed and William crossed the channel immediately. Landing in the Pevensey on September 28, he moved directly to Hastings. Harold, hurrying southward with about 7,000 men, approached Hastings on October 13th. Surprised by William at dawn on October 14th, Harold drew up his army on a ridge 10 miles, around 16 kilometers to the northwest. Harold's walls of highly trained infantry held firm in the face of William's mounted assault, failing to breach the English line, and panicked by the rumor of William's death, the Norman cavalry fled in disorder. But William, removing his helmet to show he was alive, rallied his troops, who turned and killed many English soldiers. As the battle continued, the English were gradually worn down. Late in the afternoon, Harold was killed by an arrow in the eye, according to Bayek's tapestry, and by nightfall the remaining English had scattered and fled. William then made a sweeping advance to isolate London, and at the Berkhamsted the major English leaders submitted to him. He was crowned in Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day 1066. There are many remarkable events in this period, and among others are Crusade, the religious battle between Muslims and Christians, took place in between 11th and 13th century. Magna Carta, the Great Charter which limited the power of monarchs, was passed on 15 June 1215. The English Parliament was established in 1295. The feudal system, which was very strong, broke up after the Black Death, plague in 1348 to 49. In 1362, English was declared to be a language of law and court. In the 14th century, Reformation of English Church began under the leadership of John Wycliffe, and William Caxton established printing press in 1476. After the conquest, let's continue to the second topic in this video, Middle English language. Middle English is a period of roughly 300 years from around 1150 CE to around 1450 50. Middle English is difficult to identify because it is a time of transition between two eras that each have stronger definition, Old English and Modern English. Before this period, we encounter a language which is chiefly Old Germanic in its character, in its sounds, spellings, grammar, and vocabulary. After this period, we have a language which displays a very different kind of structure, with major changes having taken place in each of these areas, many deriving from the influence of French following the previous conquest, the Norman Conquest of 1066. There are three main characteristics of the Middle English language. The first one is its grammatical characteristics. The difference between Old and Middle English is primarily due to the changes that took place in grammar. Old English was a language which contained a great deal of variation in word endings. Middle English has hardly any. And it is during the Middle English period that we see the eventual disappearance of most of the earlier inflections and the increasing reliance on alternative means of expressions using word order and prepositional constructions rather than word endings to express meaning relationships. All areas of grammar were affected. Among the new kinds of constructions were the progressive forms of the verb, as in I'm going, and the range of auxiliary verbs, such as I've seen, I didn't go, etc. The infinitive form of a verb starts to be marked by the use of a particle, to go, to jump. A new form of expressing relationship, such as possession, appeared using of as in the page of a book. Several new pronouns appeared through the influence of Old Norse. Other areas of language were also affected. The pronunciation system underwent significant changes. Several consonants and vowels altered their values and new contrastive units of sounds, called phonemes, emerged. In particular, the distinctions between the F and V consonants began to differentiate words, for example, grief and grieve, as did that between S and Z, for example, seal and zeal. The ng sound at the end of a word also became constructive. In Old English, the G had always been sounded. So we now find such pairs as seen versus sing. And at the very end of the period, all the long vowels underwent a series of changes. The way sounds were spelled altered, as French scribes introduced their own spelling convention, such as O for U in a house, G for H for night, and Ch for C for church. The second characteristic is its French influence. The French influence on English in the Middle Ages is consequence of the dominance of French power in England and of French cultural preeminence in mainland Europe in areas such as law, architecture, estate management, music, and literature. Vocabulary was especially affected in important fields such as ecclesiastical architecture, where French architects in England adopted continental sources for their cathedral designs. The associated terminology needed to express the shift of vision was very large, covering everything from building tools to aesthetic abstractions. Middle English also saw a huge increase in the use of affix, such as prefix and suffix, producing an influx of new words. Excluding inflectional endings, there are just over 100 prefix and suffix available for use in everyday English, and at least one of these will be found in around half of all the words in the language. It is during Middle English that we find the first great flood of these affix words, which French introducing such in Latin derived prefix as con, de, di, and, ex, pre, pro, and trans, and such suffix as able, ans, and, iti, ment, and xiong, at the time usually spelled xiong. The suffixes were especially productive, a trend typified by words such as tournament, defendant, solemnity, and avoidance. The tion in ending alone produced hundreds of creations such as damnation, contemplation, and suggestion. The third characteristic is its heavy use of loanwords. The flow of French loanwords into English reduced during the 15th century, but the overall rate of foreign borrowing did not decline because of the growing influence of Latin. Thanks chiefly to its role as the language of religion, scholarship, and science, Latin words will eventually have a much greater impact on English than French. Today, just over 30,000 words, excluding derived forms, have French identified as part of the history in the OED. For Latin, the corresponding figure is over 50,000. The last topic to be discussed in this video is transition to modern English. There is a period called transitional period. In this period, many exciting things happened to the English language from around 1500 until 1800. This period of time saw the effects of the Renaissance in art and literature with its strong influence on language growth. Language changes also result from social change brought about by the Great Plague. Although devastating in its death toll, this event saw many interesting changes for the English language. An exciting phenomenon arrived during this period called the Great Vowel Shift, which changed the way we pronounce words. Its influence is still important in English today. There was also a further increase in Latin and Greek words, which impact on the vocabulary of the language. And in this period, there are two important points. And the first one is the Great Vowel Shift, a complete change in the way people pronounce English vowel. Between 1450 to 1750, there is a great event in the history of the English language which saw the change from the Middle English to early modern English. It is called the Great Vowel Shift. The Great Vowel Shift saw a complete change in the way people pronounce English vowel. Vowels started to be pronounced more towards the front of the mouth. In addition to change in pronunciation of vowel in English, the letter A on many words become voiceless. For example, name change from using a short A sound and A voice ending A, pronounced as A in Middle English. The word name pronounced as namai. To how we say it today with a long A and a voiceless A, name pronounced name. The Great Vowel Shift saw a movement away from its old French-style pronunciation of vowels. The change in pronunciation can be seen even in the names of letters of the alphabet. For example, the letter A is pronounced with a long A in modern English, while French it is pronounced with a short A, sounds A, as it was in English before the Great Vowel Shift. And the second important point is the impact of the Great Plague. The Great Plague of 1665 to 1666 had a strong impact on the English language due to the cultural changes that result. The pronunciation change that took place during the Great Vowel Shift evolved in part due to the greater social mobility which happened after the Great Plague. This was because the Great Plague wiped out a large portion of aristocracy as well as the lower classes. In the 7 months, 1/5 of the population of London was dead. This merging of lower class English and higher class Anglo-Norman combined to create a new early modern English. Although difficult, this English is intelligible to English speakers today. A good example of early modern English is the language used in Shakespeare's works. And that was the last topic in this video. Thank you for watching.